Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
When our next guest got in touch on Twitter, I was delighted because we spend an awful lot of time, of course, on this programme talking about the European Union, talking about Brexit, the reasons for leaving the European Union, the reasons for staying in it, and obviously the furore over Supreme Court decisions made here and the current UK government needing to get parliamentary approval before triggering Article 50 and what that means, and the question of whether the UK will ever leave the European Union. Will it ever? I don't know. It remains to be seen. Well, our next guest is he's an economist. He was trained at Sussex University. He's also a bilingual journalist and foreign correspondent, and he's interestingly a former press spokesman at the Greek Finance Ministry. Now, he left that job following the resignation of Yanis Varoufakis in July 2015, of course, after the referendum. I'm delighted to be welcoming to the programme live from Athens, where it's getting on. It's getting late in the evening. Dimitris Yiannopoulos. Dimitris, thanks so much for coming on the programme. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me on, Richie.
It's great to have you on, and thanks for staying up, because it's getting past 11 p.m. there,
yes,
so I appreciate that.
But I'm used to that. I'm a late sleeper.
You're a late sleeper. Well, you're an academic, and I shouldn't say us academics. I mean, I did go to university, but we're used to late nights and very early mornings. Thanks for coming on.
That's right, yes.
Number of things I want to talk about, obviously, how Greece is doing now, what happened in 2015. But before I do that, were you surprised that the people of the UK voted in June of last year to leave the European Union? How did you obviously followed it, you were educated here. What did you make of that decision, and did you expect it?
I think I was not surprised at all, and I was delighted. In fact, most of the Greeks here saw the glimmer of hope that they were expecting from abroad, because their own defeat has been dramatic and disastrous. Right now, Greece is being slowly and systematically destroyed. It's an economic genocide what's going on. It's not an economic program. So when we heard that the Britons said no to this concentration camp that calls itself the Eurozone and the EU by extension, I mean, most of the Greeks were secretly delighted. And I say secretly because the left in Greece, having betrayed its own mandate of 2015, has turned all around and become the most vicious agent to apply and to conform and to comply to the orders of the so-called Troika, which are mainly the three big European institutions, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and a European institution that should not even dare to lay foot on Europe, and that's the IMF, the notorious IMF, which is probably, I think the most criminal economic organization on the planet. Millions and millions of people in the third world have suffered out of the so-called program which the IMF imposes, and the program is, of course, one of harsh austerity, privatization of everything that is not private already, slashing of wages and pensions. All that was imposed on Greece in the year 2010, May 2010, when the socialist government, so-called socialist government of George Papandreou, had decided illegally to take us into the IMF with the agreement of the Germans. Since then, of course, the Germans have used the Greek tragedy to implement a series of measures that have turned the Eurozone into something grotesque, something completely inhuman, and the catastrophe which Greece has suffered has become a kind of a common secret. People are referring to Greece as if it's some kind of a malignant tumor or an illness that has no cure, a terminal cancer, so to speak. They say that we shouldn't become Greece or shouldn't go near where Greece resides at the moment, which is somewhere between hell and the purgatory. And so, quite frankly, it was a great historic victory of the British people, because it was the first no that they gave to what should probably be called now the Fourth Reich.
No doubt about it. I want to, you know what, listening to you there, and I'm hanging on every word there, by the way. What was it like for you, Dimitris, then, as the spokesman at the Ministry of Finance, with your opinions and with your knowledge of what was going on? How did you feel when Tsipras and, to a certain extent, you might disagree with it, but Varoufakis, when they basically betrayed the Greek people? When you saw that happen, what happened?
That would surprise you, Richie, but I think Varoufakis is probably more responsible for what happened than Tsipras, because Tsipras was an economic ignoramus. He trusted Varoufakis on everything. And
Varoufakis is a traitor, right?
You wanted to ask me something?
Sorry to interrupt you there, but people like me probably shouldn't use inflammatory language, but I'm going to use it. I predicted this, I tell you, Dimitris, and I get so much wrong. When Tsipras was elected, I predicted this very scenario would unfold. But I just said there, maybe I shouldn't use this language, but I'm going to use it. Varoufakis is a traitor, right? He's a traitor to the Greek people.
I don't use that word because he used to be a good friend of mine. We spent long hours discussing economics, the situation in Europe, and the situation in Greece, of course, a long time before he became finance minister. And that's the reason why he was happy to have me as his spokesman when Syriza got elected. But what I realized, what I soon realized, was that Varoufakis and Tsipras and the leadership of Syriza had done a deal with the powers that be to get into government without challenging, under any circumstances, the legality of the system that was imposed in Greece in 2010. That was a sine qua non term which the IMF forces secretly to every government that it cooperates with to sign, namely that you won't dispute the legality of my program. Why? Because its programs are a recipe for genocide, a recipe for economic disaster, a recipe for killing millions of people. And I'm talking killing not only in terms of the thousands of Greeks that have committed suicide, people who have seen their businesses, middle class income destroyed, people who had become homeless and couldn't stand the loss of dignity that this implied, right? Because nobody was poor in Greece before 2010. There was no poverty. We were like every other country. Okay, there were people who were making ends meet very difficult, but still they retained their dignity. Nobody had to know the difficulties that they were facing, and they would ask for help very seldom. So when this happened, within 2 years, people losing jobs, people losing their businesses, people being bankrupt and owing millions which they never borrowed, to the government or the banks. That was something that destroyed these people. And I'm not talking only about suicide. I'm talking about the skyrocketing rates of cancer, heart disease, strokes, and above all, the 700,000 youths that had to migrate from Greece to seek jobs in Europe, in England. And we're talking about doctors, engineers, technicians, highly trained and very experienced, which Germany, England, and other countries, France, Holland, immediately took advantage of, because they came there in despair. They could live with half the salary of their peers, and that was a big disaster, because it wasn't just a brain drain this time. It was, which we have, of course, sustained before. It was a loss of a whole generation. Right now, the real unemployment in Greece is over 30%. It's 1.5 million people. Of course, it's not registered, and they say, okay, it's around 26, 27%. It's very high. It's 60% of youth is unemployed, and that's the reason why there's this mass exodus from Greece. And at the same time, of course, they have exploited this situation in order to create the influx of all these refugees who were sent through Turkey ostensibly to go to Europe, but ended up being stranded in Greece. And we had to feed them too, we had to care for them too, and of course our system of health and social welfare has collapsed,
yeah.
And the IMF is using this as a pretext to say that your social security system is not sustainable, so you have to cut all pensions until they end up being a sort of charity, £100 per month. That's their target. They haven't reached there yet, but they're very close, because there are many pensioner families living on 400 euros per month, or 300 euros per month pensions. And salaries are also very, very quickly reaching that level too, you see, because this is the ruthlessness of this system, which the IMF and Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister, Dr. Strangelove, I call him, have enforced on Greece. It's sort of like nobody can explain it in economic or political terms. this is a case of Germanic vindictiveness and I don't know what else. Some people are talking about a revenge for what Greece had done to Germany by resisting during World War II, because they had to keep a lot of soldiers and armed forces in Greece, in the occupied Greece, which they needed at that time to bolster their Russian campaign. They couldn't do that, and some people say that it was Greek resistance that ultimately caused the German defeat. But anyway, these are theories about motives, but we're dealing with an ongoing crime, and this is what everybody should realize in Europe. And I heard you before you contacted me. I heard you talking about the right and the left.
Yes.
Let me tell you straight away. It's not that there are no distinctions anymore. It's that these distinctions, these differences, have been reversed. Now the right is left and the left is right. And you saw it in Brexit. All the working people, middle class people, all the marginalized social strata in England voted for Brexit, and they won. The same happened in the United States. Why? Because the working class has finally found a replacement for this treasonous strand of leftism that basically had abandoned the working class long ago, right? Talking about political correctness, about women's rights, transgender rights, gender differences, gender.
Let me come back in.
LGBTQ and all that. That's the only issue. And of course, long live the refugees, long live Islam. Don't you dare talk foul of Islam, because you are an Islamophobe, you are a xenophobe, you are a racist, you are a nationalist, you are this, that, and the other, a fascist. I mean, this is the situation which the left has brought to Europe and the United States since its espousal of so-called cultural Marxism. That was a time when the working class again shunned the left, but for different reasons. Okay, they had a better life then, but that was also the time when the left decided that since the working class was fairly comfortable with capitalism, let's try to undermine capitalism in a different way. At the end, what they managed to do is to undermine not capitalism, but the system of the nation state on which capitalism also is founded. And so they became the tools of the most horrendous finance oligarchy the world has ever seen, because these people are creating money for themselves and pulling any surplus that's produced in the real economy in order to recycle this surplus which they create out of nothing.
Let me back in. Let me back in, Dimitris.
This is the situation, you see.
Yeah, let me back in.
It's not the left versus the right. It's the new left versus the new right, where the roles have been reversed.
Well, for me, and I know you know this because I know you've had a look at the program. For me, ultimately, these financial institutions that we talk about have for many years controlled both sides of the coin anyway, and we don't have to go down that road. But and I want to ask you about. There's a lot of questions coming in, and we're already at 26 minutes past the hour. We've got till about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions from our listeners now. They're all good questions. They're all fair questions. Before I do that, though, you talked about it being the Fourth Reich. I contend the institutions of the European Union, the European Central Bank, were set up to lure countries into their trap in order to loan these countries massive amounts of money, credit, which never existed, so that later on, let me finish now, Demetrius, you've had a long say there, let me finish, this is important, in order to, basically, when those countries cannot pay back that debt, they then come and they enforce the system of privatization you just described there. John Perkins wrote an amazing book on this called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's what's been going on in Europe. Tell me this, why did Yanis Varoufakis not push the Greek people and push his friend Tsipras to leave the European Union? Why did he not do that? Why did he not say, we've got to get out, we've got to get out of the euro?
First of all, Tsipras and Varoufakis did not have a mandate to take Greece out of the euro. And I agreed with them in the sense that Greece is no more a member of the Union, of the Eurozone. For me, and I had told Yanis Varoufakis that before they came to power, Greece is a prisoner country, a country that appears to have been defeated in some kind of a terrible war, a hostile country that must be punished for its deeds. So this country, in order to rescue whatever is left of its economy, cannot just say, bye-bye now, you destroyed me, and I decide to go out. No, it has to stay there, and it has to seek compensation for all the catastrophe that has happened. And that was what Varoufakis had agreed in the beginning, but they managed to trick him into believing that he could just negotiate some kind of a deal, some kind of an interim agreement that would help the country move out of this stranglehold. But in the end, he pushed the country deeper into that stranglehold, because all through the months, the 5 months that Varoufakis was at the finance ministry, the European Central Bank was formally and officially carrying out a policy which it called financial asphyxiation until Greece agrees to follow the program to which it is obliged. This is, we can talk about the general crime, but there are also specific crimes by the European Central Bank. The situation of financial asphyxiation has been something that has gone in tandem with austerity, in tandem with internal devaluation, so-called, which is, cuts of pensions and wages and everything, except for commodity prices, of course, that remained as expensive as in Paris or London, while wages had been cut 40 or 80%. And so these policies, the different European institutions, including the IMF, were following these policies with a kind of division of labor. The ECB was about strangling the private economy, the banking system, the finance, right? Businesses could not, all of a sudden, could not have any working capital. They found themselves unable to cash in their supply, their invoices, they were suppliers of the state, right? And the state had no money
to pay them,
because there was no liquidity in the economy. And Varoufakis, instead of saying here and there, I refuse to accept that. This is a completely illegal situation. I demand to be treated as an equal partner and not a punished prisoner, a tortured prisoner. In fact, he had coined the excellent term fiscal waterboarding. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
Yes, fiscal waterboarding. He used that term. But he used it as if it was something that part of a negotiating process, something that could be accepted at face value, something that was legal or legitimate. But it was not. And this is the big secret which the IMF had forced on every Greek government since 2010. Never challenge the legality, the legitimacy of the measures that we impose.
So they couldn't. So nobody could challenge the legitimacy of them.
He told me straight away when I said, why don't you come out and condemn and protest these measures that are carried out, because it's an outright blackmail. And he said, well, I told the IMF, and the IMF says, you won't do any such thing because you've agreed not to. And that's it.
But he hadn't agreed not to. Let me jump in there, Dimitris. He hadn't agreed not to. This is what I can't understand, and my heart breaks.
He had agreed.
Okay, he had agreed. He had agreed when he took office.
He had agreed not to challenge.
Okay, I accept that. So he agreed when he took office not to challenge. However, this is what and everything you've described about what's happened to Greece breaks my heart, because it's happening in Ireland now, and it's not just happening in Ireland, it's happening elsewhere. Let me put this to you. Tsipras told the Greek people to reject the terms of the bailout. The Greek people followed Tsipras down a blind alley. They agreed with him and they rejected the terms of the bailout. At that time, why didn't the government then put an in-out referendum to the Greek people? Why did Tsipras then go and do what he did a few weeks later and sign a deal that was even worse? And more importantly, why did Varoufakis write that very cryptic article, that strange article where he said that essentially he couldn't get on well with his European financial minister counterparts, which was crazy. Surely it was his job not to get on with these people. It was his job to fight for Greece. So why did Tsipras not call an in-out referendum, and why did Varoufakis do that?
You are very astute in observing these two inconsistencies. Tsipras, on the one hand, refusing to abide by the decision of the Greek referendum, and Varoufakis resigning because the ministers, the Europeans, didn't like him. It was a bit late for that, wasn't it?
Outrageous.
He had 6 months. He already had 6 months to resign, if that was his problem. But let me explain. Both Tsipras and Varoufakis and the leadership of Syriza never believed that the Greeks would vote no to the bailout. Why? Because they had already shut down the banks. There were no banks operating. People could only withdraw from ATMs 60 euros per week.
That's right.
For about 20 days. And long after the referendum, the banks were open, but the limits, the capital controls, so-called, still prevailed. Now, Varoufakis, if anybody goes back and reads on his website, actually, the articles where he publishes his statements at the Eurogroups, especially the last Eurogroup before the referendum, that was June 26, I think, where he said, after all, why bother? I mean, you know that, give us a week extension, because anyway, you know that the people will vote yes. They're in such a mess and in such a bad situation that they're going to vote yes. So please don't make such a fuss about the referendum. Now, the people, but the problem was this, that Syriza could not come out and say, please vote yes, because we want to get out of this trap with our heads up, the way George Papandreou was dismissed by Merkel in 2011. The people were hardened and determined to fight to the end, and that's why they voted no.
And they believe Tsipras.
And that surprised them, you see, because it didn't give them, they were hoping that a yes would be an escape, an exit, an escape from their responsibilities, because the government would fall, a new government would be installed, and so Syriza would still try to play the opposition game, which they didn't. But the Germans, I think, knew that the vote would come out a strong 62% no, and they trapped both of them. They said, all right, Tsipras, right now, get rid of Varoufakis, and when you come to negotiate a new deal with us, a completely new deal, because everything that was agreed in the past years has been is finished, you will come to us alone.
And he was going to get punished.
Tsipras, I mean, how can Tsipras ever negotiate something which he didn't understand?
I wouldn't,
under enormous pressure. I mean, I could understand these people, having reached that stage. Even myself said, for God's sake, stop this torture of the people. Do whatever is necessary to. But that's when the Germans decided to crush us, or to crush completely
whatever was left.
People, because the measures they imposed were so extreme and is still demanding
more.
Worse.
Blood out of a stone.
Yeah.
Let me just do a quick recap. 20 minutes to the top of the hour. We've got 10 more minutes with Dimitris Yiannopoulos, who is a former spokesman at the Greek Finance Ministry. He's an economist as well. He worked with and for Yanis Varoufakis. Dimitris, there's no getting away from what I'm going to say now. And I know you might not agree with it. Maybe you will. I'm going to put it to you anyway. The only way to end this tyranny is when countries get rid of central banks, when currency returns to the national sovereign currency, the Irish punt, the drachma in Greece, and that currency is issued debt-free by the government of the day in those countries. That's the only way forward for countries like Greece, Ireland, right?
100%. I agree
100%, right?
With you. I have studied the economics of the new banking theories, etc., and that's what should happen. But the point is that the system that's in place for the past 250 years, where the central bankers say, give me the control of the money supply, the quantity of money, and I don't care who makes the laws. This is a doctrine. This is a religion. This is a strategy towards a world order where finance becomes completely dissociated from the real economy or markets. It controls markets. It manipulates markets. It manipulates the people who are active in the markets. Do you think that George Soros and all his moves are, really risks that he takes every now and then? No, he is carrying out an agenda. He is enforcing certain principles and certain tactics which have to be implemented in order to reach the goal of one world government, one world religion, one world army, one world, whatever. And this is what they are pursuing ruthlessly. Now, of course, there's been a break with Brexit, and there's a break with Trump, and that's what makes them go into these. That's what makes them freak out, especially the mainstream media, right?
Absolutely right. Can I ask you this, Dimitris? Can I ask you this? This is extraordinary stuff. We have a former government official working at the Greek Finance Ministry in Athens, actually telling the truth about what's going on. There has been for many, many years, and you were right, by the way, when you emailed me to say the other day, it's not just a Rothschild. We don't say it's just a Rothschild conspiracy. It's far more complex than that. It's a central banking conspiracy with families like Warburg, Rockefeller, Oppenheimer, working with governments and royal families through the centuries to bring about what we're seeing now, which is the total control of the planet
let me
through these institutions, right?
Let me give you a small historical detail so that I will substantiate what you're saying, but in a different way. In 2014, August 2014, the Baron Jacob de Rothschild was in Corfu, where he has one of his many palaces, mansions, etc. He probably has more than Queen Elizabeth. And anyway, he was in Corfu. Now, he gave an interview that was a rare interview that he had given to an insignificant, unknown Corfu, the island of Corfu newspaper, a local newspaper, where among the other things which he said, Europe, the European Union, has a future which at the moment is in the balance, both in the economic and in the political sense. Now, this was reported nowhere, but I'm sure that people took. It's still on YouTube, actually. If you search Jacob Rothschild 2014 Corfu interview, you probably get the YouTube portion where he says that. That, for me, was just a signal of what they were going to do. But how they would do it was probably unknown even to them. Do you understand? Because this colossal, gargantuan structure is not centrally controlled. There's a hive mind that moves this system. There's partly artificial intelligence, partly human intelligence, partly secret agencies, secret societies, this, that, or the other. But the moment somebody like Jacob Rothschild, who is the fourth Baron of the Rothschild dynasty, of course, that Rothschild is a baronet.
Yes.
The Rothschilds are a family of baronets.
They love their titles and their rituals, yeah, they do.
Yes, and he's the fourth leader of that family. Now, the more he says that Europe, the European Union, etc., is not it's in a precarious state, and we probably have to dispose of it. You can understand that thousands and millions of minions knew that whenever they heard of, hey, this is not good for Europe, they say, well, but Rothschild said that it's going to happen, so, well, what can we do? So they let it happen. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
And this is the relative autonomy of the realms of power in this system. We don't know. I don't know. I mean, David Icke is too certain about what happens at the deep levels of power in the world. But I choose to remain skeptical because I've read more than David Icke.
Well, you don't know that, but I understand. Look, you're entitled to your opinion.
I know that because, if I had to write all those thousands of pages of books, I would know very little about philosophy. I would know very little about history, or very little about things, somebody tells me about. But anyway, he's close. He did, but he has to be more dialectical in his approach in order to understand these forces.
Well, I tell you something on that, Demetrius. I've known David a long time, and one thing he doesn't have is he doesn't have a big ego, and he's prepared to take criticism from no matter where it comes from. But I will say this: the origins of these families, where they come from, what they've been doing, the economic system. He's been researching that and looking at that for 30 years. But so have you, and your opinion is equally as valid as his. Here's the question for you in the 3 or 4 minutes we have left. What are we going to do about this, Demetrius? What can ordinary men and women like you and me do to stop these people?
One thing we mustn't do is lose hope, because the system right now has come into a state of real disintegration. If Trump manages to stay alive, say for the next 1 or 2 years, the German Euro empire is going to collapse. Everybody knows that. And, especially if, despite all the internal differences, Trump manages to make peace with Putin and then create kind of an axis which includes, the United States, Russia, England, and maybe some other European countries that would be freed by that time. The scenario of globalization that has been operating so far will have to change, and it will have to take more care of real people, real economics, real producers. Go back again, and if you read the reports from the biggest banks, I remember reading an HSBC, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch. They put out all those reports every now and then. They have no qualms in admitting that their model of globalization so far has failed. So globalism does need a little bit of nationalism to be able to function properly. Now, this is, for me, a moment of opportunity. You cannot say that Trump, because he's got a few people who worked for Goldman Sachs, he's a Goldman Sachs puppet. He's not.
We're going to have to wait and see, Demetrius. We're going to have to wait and see on that.
Well, everybody says we're going to wait and see. That's John Pilger said. When they asked him, but what's going to happen? Oh, we have to wait and see. Look, I'm saying, if within the next 6 months Trump fails to make peace with Russia, he's finished.
Well,
we don't have to wait and see.
At least in the eyes of those who supported him. Demetrius, I'm going to wrap it up because we're running out of time and I've got to get off the air. I do want to ask you to do me a favour, though. Please come back on the programme again in the very near future. Let's get
Thank you very much for having me.
Listen, it was an honour. I'm so glad you connected and you reached out to us. I did mention to you the other day to get a Skype account. Get a Skype account up and running, and let's get you back on, and we'll do a longer segment a bit earlier.
Well, my Wi-Fi connection is not very secure, so I don't want to have to cut this in midair, but I will try, sure.
And no, but the reason I mentioned that particularly is because there's not so much of a delay. There is a little delay my end, but with Skype we could eliminate that. Sincere thanks, heartfelt thanks for having the courage to say what it is that you've said today and other days in your writings and that. I can't say that highly enough. It takes incredible balls, my friend, to say some of the things that you've said and to tell the truth. I'll be in touch with you.
I'm not looking forward to getting a new job.
No.
And I'm very uncertain about my pension, but anyway. I'm 63. I'm a bit.
You're a young man.
David Icke's age. You're much younger than me.
Well, not much younger, but a little bit younger. And you're still a young man, Demetrius, so it takes a lot of courage. Thanks for coming on the programme. I'll be in touch with you within the next few days and we'll arrange to do this again.
Thank you. All the best.
It was an honour. Thanks for staying up so late. Thanks. I appreciate that. Dimitris Yiannopoulos, former spokesman at the Greek Finance Ministry, worked for, with and under Yanis Varoufakis. And I don't remember a time when a guy like that was as honest as he was about how he sees things, how they've gone down, why they've gone down the way they've gone down. I think it's quite extraordinary.